like there were more important things to believe in than Santa. And guess what? Abby started believing in the Tooth Fairy, like the Tooth Fairy was a real person. And I thought, well, this is interesting. I took away Santa, and she got this Tooth Fairy, like, big, like, and I thought, I guess she needs that, and I am going to give it to her. So Pearl, the Tooth Fairy, would write little notes, and Abby would ask questions, and Pearl would type it up on the computer in little tiny font and leave notes. And Olivia finally said, there's no such thing as a Tooth Fairy, is there? And Abby went, like, what you going to say to that? And I kind of said, well, what do you think? And they finally said, okay, that was, made up. But there was a need for that that I had not acknowledged.
And if I can make one that I didn't write down, a connection, is that across the world, all cultures have some kind of magical, symbol or some person that they give credits to against their reason. And it's almost a magical choice we make by ourselves.
Yeah.
So, because I was just thinking, every single culture has its magical beings, has its, if you do this, then this will happen.
And so what does that provide for us? That hope or belief that we need so much?
Well, I think it does, because otherwise you have to go with the facts.
Yeah. I think for kids it's like, it provides hope and magic.
So that
excitement.
The world doesn't have to be just the way we see it. It can
There's
be
something beyond what we see.
Bigger and better and...
Well, consider death. I mean, we deal with death. We're saying there's something beyond what we see. There is a place that person is in. That's how we get over it. Like, we don't...
Right.
We say that what I see is not the final word.
Right.
So I think that part of being human is that desire and that choice of what I see, the facts, cold facts, aren't the final
thing. Yeah.
So we just start practicing as young children that ability to believe in something bigger. And actually children are better at it than adults.
Right? Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
I've talked about someone else.
Okay, well, I want to...
Yes, what do you want to say?
Okay, so one of my questions, this is, do you think that Aunt Minty is the quiet one from the Flower Children? But then one of my inferences I think Aunt Minty set up the whole Flower Children idea.
So including the teacups or not including?
Including everything.
Including the teacups and the book.
So you're holding this, like, okay, stark reality. She went out there and she dug some holes and she put the teacups in there because she wanted to help transform the children, which this process did. Or maybe really there's some kind of magic going on.
So I want to ask you guys what you thought about those two, like...
Oh, gosh. I went back and forth for a while. Because she did realize that the teacups were in the border of the picture. That was totally her.
Yes.
So
okay, but why was that first teapot there? Here's what I think. I think she planted the first teapot, and the second one
magically appeared.
That's what I ended up deciding in the end.
Okay.
Or as I say, believing and choosing that was going to be my answer because it was different. The first teapot was different than the rest. And that was kind of what turned...
Like she went to the Goodwill and looked for the best teapot that would match these
right.
cups.
And it was very differently. It was very deep gems.
And that's when Olivia looked and said,
yeah.
Right.
Aunt Minty, you are playing with fire here.
Yes.
Because Nellie's going to be so disappointed when the children don't come back to life.
Yeah. What about you? What did you decide?
Well, I thought all the way to the end that Aunt Minty was the quiet one. But when I went back and read the book the second time, that's when I thought, did she plant all this? She was the one that brought up the idea, told the story, put the first teacup, did she put the first teacup there to get them excited about it? Was she just coaching them along?
She took them out into the yard and said, help me find the lady slippers.
And then
and her
picture,
garden hat was still on it as if she never took it off. So what was she doing?
Right. And then the picture, she found the clues.
Right.
And then I thought, well, the author of the book, did she really write it? So the second time around is when I came up with the other idea.
Now, Gosh, I just thought of something and it went flying on my head. I'll think of it again.
Okay, so then the author of the man who wrote the story, that most of the stories weren't very good, but this story was really good, and lived in the house.
See, she lived in the house.
Yeah.
Oh, I remember now. But if we go with that she was helping the children and that she did the whole thing so that they could get over the death of their mother, find friends, etc., then she'd still be filling that role because the smallest one was the most helpful. And
That
so
is
either
true.
way you look at it, she still, maybe she wasn't like physically, literally the smallest child in the story, but she's still that role,
Right.
you know, in
That's
the story. Either way you go. So.
And when you said that, it also reminded me of how the power of the story, the little story that they read together over Nellie, that as she thought about the smallest child was most helpful, I think that made her begin to think, I'm the smallest child. I could be different than I am. I could be helpful, and I could
Yeah.
accomplish things in the world instead of being the one that everybody has to cater to.
Yeah.
And because she
does
heard that
study up
story
with-
every night.
Right, and that was my second inference, is that I said, I think that the search for the T set positively affected Nellie.
Yeah,
So I have to
I agree with that
Mhm.
inference. And it partly, I think Aunt Nenty was either very wise or the magic is very wise, because she had something outside of herself that pulled her out. She had some search beyond thinking about her own sadness or worries or whatever, going out and that. I mean, it was a little surprising when she heard the boys riding their bikes and went out and got them. I mean, that you're thinking, is she really going to do that?
I know.
And when the flowers didn't magically turn into children, I thought, okay, she's going to have a fit.
I thought
She's
so
gonna-
too, I was waiting.
What
Yes.
was that? Something about a raging howl or something?
Right,
Yeah.
That would be
Yeah.
heard further miles. So.
And to have her say, but one of the things I really believe in life is that people can change. And sometimes I don't believe that. Sometimes I think, this person is never going to. But I have to cling to that there's always
There's always
hope that
Yeah.
we can be transformed
Mhm.
by the situations, by the people we meet, by whatever. And I guess as teachers, that would be a good thing to cling to.
Right.
To think that as you meet children in your class who are really in a difficult
Yeah.
place, there's hope for transformation. And
Right.
that Nellie, exemplified that kind of transformation in
Right,
the story.
exactly.
That kind of makes me think of my first connection, which was the connection to, it's a text connection to The Secret Garden. And have you,
I have read it many years ago.
Basic, yeah, and you know the basic idea of The Secret Garden, but how they do through having that outside quest almost. They change. They change.
Right.
The little boy gets out of the house. The little girl grows up, and so yeah, it just the two stories kind
That's a
of
good
parallel.
one.
Yeah, and it was a specialist who that working with nature, which I find to be a very magical part of our world.
Mhm.
So,
Yeah.
There was just an article in Newsweek that was about depression, and a guy claiming, a doctor I guess, claiming that a big part of modern depression is our disconnect from nature.
mhm.
People weren't depressed like they are now when they're isolated from each other, lost their community, which is another part of the book, isolated from nature, and overwhelmed with information from too far away in the world. That the horrible things happening in
Okay.
Africa or in flooding
Yeah.
and you can do nothing about, and it just
Yeah, and I would add also the pressure to respond to all that information
Right.
because I always feel like I'm running around trying to keep up with our high pressure society. You
Mhm.
know, like I need to get this done, I need to get this paperwork filed, I need to get,
yeah.
and I need to make sure I leave 5 minutes early so that I have time to get my food at the drive-thru because there's no way I can cook it at home because I have to be there by this time, and you feel like you're chasing your tail the entire time, and sometimes it is depressing. But
Well, I have to agree with him though. That's coming from my psychological background. That getting in touch, stopping and smelling the roses, or listening to the sounds that you might hear, like my house is back up to the woods, and
Right.
I'm enjoying listening to the leaves blowing and going across the grass, and like the frogs at night, and stuff like that, that it gives me a sense of peace, that I can just escape from everything that happened that day, or it gets me ready for what I have to deal with for the day.
Right.
So I have to possibly agree with that.
So, you know, it's funny, when you read a book, just read it for pleasure. It's a nice story and you enjoy it, but when you start getting into it like this, you find all these themes that are sort of universal nature themes and transformation and death, and it's bigger than you realize when you just from the surface of it.
Right, yeah.
And of course, I never heard this word schema before taking this class, and trying to think about how you talk about schema with kids, sort of, you know, everything that in you that you bring to a text, and how every one of us has a different schema, and so every text you read is going to be different.
Right.
You know, it's different for each person, and that's good and exciting. It's not like, well, you're wrong. that we can. I never thought of it that way.
And you change your own schema by listening.
Right.
Too.
Right.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay, are we done?
The end.
The end.